Good morning. It is day 4, and we're on our journey where we're looking at spiritual dejection. And again, we said that the spiritual dejection is kind of like a jolt, a trauma. Something has happened. We're despondent. We're maybe even drifting toward depression. And this is not an uncommon thing, but it's something that we have to know how to navigate to go through them and come out in a healthy way, moving ourselves toward God on the other side of spiritual dejection. We're going to look again at the life of David. And we're going forward a little bit in David's life. And now David is toward the last 7 years or so of his 40-year reign. And a lot has transpired. David, like many of the other men of his day, had married multiple wives. The kings particularly, that was a common practice. It was not the will of God. God tolerated it because of the times. It was never His will. So because of that, you had complex family structures. So in other words, you could have a brother and a sister who technically, they had different mothers. They would have the same father, in this case David, but different mothers, and so they were kind of related, but not entirely related like brother and sister. So what happened is that there was one particular brother, one of David's children, his name was Amnon, and Amnon fell in love with his half-sister Tamar. He ends up raping her. Now her full brother Absalom, he is enraged about this, what Amnon has done to his full sister, and intends revenge, and he waits until his opportunity, and finally he kills him. So when he kills him, he has to go on the run because now David, his father, is angry at him, at Absalom. Absalom leaves for 3 years. Finally, David allows him to come back. But even when Absalom comes back to Jerusalem, he refuses to see him for 2 more years. So it's 5 whole years that Absalom is essentially not allowed to be in the presence of his father for the terrible thing that he did. So finally, he's persuaded by his counselors, David is, that is to let Absalom come back. Now what David doesn't know is that Absalom has been angry at this time, and he's been trying to win over all the people of the kingdom away from David. When they would come to have a talk with David about some need that they had, he would capture them first, and he'd say, "Oh, if only I were king, I'd help you with this. I don't know if my dad will have the time or be interested, but boy, I would help you." And it says in Scripture that he won the people's hearts over gradually. So Absalom, once he believed that he had enough military support, he revolts and he tries to kill his own father. And David has to run for his life. He has to take his loyal troops. They have to run. He leaves his throne, and for a very short period of time, Absalom took over the throne of his father. Now eventually David's troops, they fight back, and that's where we'll pick up today, because this is about spiritual dejection, where it's a loss that you feel like you'll never get over. David, in having to fight back against his own son, ultimately it causes the death of his son. One of David's generals catches Absalom. Absalom is fleeing away in a battle, and he gets caught in a tree. The soldier spears him, kills him, and then the news is brought back to David, and I'll just read you his response. In chapter 18, verse 33, it says, "The king," meaning David, "was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway, and he wept. And as he went, he said, oh, my son Absalom, my son, Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." Now you get into chapter 19, he kept doing this, and he was doing it in front of the troops that had just fought for him. And so finally his general tells him, he says, "Look, David, you got to knock this off." Joab says, you've got to go out and encourage your troops regardless of what kind of grief you're feeling. But David is in a terrible situation because the loss feels like something he can never, ever quite get over, the loss of his son. So there are those occasions in life where some of us, if not all of us at times, we're going to experience loss. And it's going to be a loss that we're going to feel like, at least, that we're never going to get over. And frankly, to some measure, that might be okay, meaning this, that it changes us somehow. It changes the way we think. It changes the way we feel in a more godly way, Makes us more tender, more sympathetic, more compassionate, more humble, more broken. Those are not bad things. And pain sometimes is a great catalyst to catapult us forward in spiritual growth in those kinds of areas. So if you're going through loss right now, it's critical. Pour out your feelings, but pour them out in the appropriate venue. David was not. David was pouring out his feelings in front of his men who had just risked their lives for him. He needed to get along with God. He needed to get along with some safe people, some spiritual counsel, and pour out his heart until, though he would never be completely over his loss, he was over it so that it was developing his character instead of disintegrating his character further. As much as I hope, once again, that this is something that none of you will ever need, truth is we'll probably all need this at some time. Thank you.